next day, transferred to the 7th floor. The way cancer came into my life was my stomach started getting distended, bigger and bigger. And I was actually on a trip overseas with a friend. I was in London, Paris, and Amsterdam, and my sheets at night were drenched with sweat. I just assumed it was the environment. I was like, it's probably the environment. I don't know why I assumed that, but I did. And then I came home and it was like drenching night sweats. The stomach started getting bigger and bigger. And so basically for a week in the hospital, I was in the hospital for a total of 15 days. For a week, they had to put a nephrostomy tube in me and distend about 8 liters of fluid from my abdomen. So I was bedridden for a whole week. And then after that, 3 days before I left for those 15 days, the medical director came to me. She goes, listen, we've asked you a ton of questions. At that point, Ian, I probably saw I counted 19 different doctors. Literally, I felt like a VIP. I don't know what I deserved to get that treatment, but it was amazing.
Hi, everyone. We are here today with a very interesting guest. His name is Savio Clemente, and he is coming in from Westchester, New York, and has quite an interesting story to tell. And Savio was born in 1976 and has gone through some really intense times of his life, and that has produced some really good, great understanding and valuable information that he can share with people. And welcome to the show, Savio. And if you could give us first of all, give us a snapshot of your life and what brought you to what we're going to talk about today. And then we'll carry on from a couple more points right after that.
Ian, thank you so much for the invitation to be on. I appreciate it. I am a media journalist. I'm a board-certified wellness coach, a recent TEDx speaker, and a best-selling author. And another addition to my title is a stage 3 cancer survivor, which is what I'm here to really talk about today. And for me, I've always just been a very inquisitive child and always pondering the meaning of life. And even as early as 6 years old, I grew up Catholic, but I always wanted to explore different belief systems. And so I made an ardent attempt to do that for most of my life. And I really believe that the challenges I've had in my life were a direct result of me processing or using those experiences for my benefit and for other people's benefit. So I just do my best to spread as much insight and awareness because I feel like I've gleaned that in my own.
So you got to go through the Catholic world for a little bit.
I did for a long time. Actually, I was an altar boy in elementary school. I went to a Catholic elementary school for 8 years, small class size of 18 to 22 people. And then I went to a public high school. And in college, I just knew, I went to a Jesuit university, actually. And then I just knew in my, at the end of my freshman year that I wanted to explore other things. That's what a big city will do for you. It'll put you with people and situations that are so out of your comfort zone that you either rise or that you fall. And I decided to rise from it. So.
Well, yeah, I had an interesting experience with my brother. He's my second oldest brother. But I was told that I was a Protestant. So I was like, what's a Protestant? Well, we protest the Catholic Church. I go, we do? Oh, okay. I don't understand. So these are these titles you get, right?
I do.
And so when my brother grew up, I'm the youngest out of 5, and everybody went to university in the family except for me because I ended up going out west and working in the oil field when I was 18, which was totally different than what anybody expected. At any rate, he ended up going to University of Waterloo, and then he went out to Laval University in Old Quebec City. And that is a totally Jesuit of Jesuits. He was there long enough that he became a staunch Catholic to this day. So it was like, wow, the family was quite shocked at that actually, because it was the exact opposite of what you would expect from somebody raised as a, Protestant.
That's what environment will do.
Yeah, it's interesting. But, each person, has their own journey and believes what they believe because they believe it. And, we're not here to interpret anything or tell them that what they should believe. If somebody asks you what you believe, you tell them. And that, I don't go and volunteer that information because it's invitation only. Whereas most religions are trying to recruit you into their religion rather than letting you go down the road and, find your way. And if you ask, great, fine. We can have a conversation.
In my senior year of college, so I went to a liberal arts, a lot of theater people, and they had the musical Hair. I just remember this one salient point in Hair, which was, as long as I don't hurt anybody, that's all that matters. I think you can believe whatever you want as long as it's not impeding on someone's rights or liberties or freedoms. And I think that's really what it should be. So you can believe whatever you want, and I don't really care. And,
Exactly. Yeah. And the do no harm thing is a really big thing, because I find most religions are extremely harmful in that they push people under a title, and then they become entitled, and then they subscribe to that and think that everybody should believe what they believe because they believe it. And the same thing really applies into the health realm. We're just here to support people, and we are all, seeking to be tuned into reality. Who are you? Where did you come from? What are you doing here? What's your mission? Where are you going from here? A topic that I'd like to know about: what is your mission, and what are your goals in this whole health realm, overall with your experience?
I would probably say the overarching through line in my mission is really what I echoed in my TEDx talk towards the end, which was to know thyself is to heal thyself. I think that's very important. And I know it has some references to biblical text, but for me, it's really just about this aspect of knowing self on a deeper guttural level, and also facing that when some life crisis or health crisis comes into your midst. And so I wanted to not only get better and healthy, but I wanted to prove to myself that what I've learned and what I've studied and what I've ascribed to and what I've worked through and worked on, that it meant something, that I was here to validate that for myself and maybe to show and model that to other people. And so nothing better to test your might than a really bad health crisis. And for me, it showed up in the form of stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's officially called DLBCL, which is diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which did not run in my family. No one had it. And people ask me all the time, you're probably living a very sort of carefree life. No, I was living a pretty responsible one in terms of health. I was eating organic food, hormone-free, exercise 6 days a week, drinking water, seeing a naturopath every year, taking my vitamins. But of course, that's just one aspect of our lives, right? The physical. There's these other aspects. And I would say that those were poor at the time. So however cancer came in, it came in. And I just decided for myself I needed to confront it and find a way through the maze towards healing.
Yeah, you have to. It's confronting you for a reason, and it's there for a reason. As a result, you've learned a lot. And, I went through similar things. I never had cancer. I would never allow anybody to tell me I had cancer, even though I had a huge tumor between my legs in the perineum that would have taken me out. Nobody did any biopsies. I wouldn't allow anybody to touch me after. They couldn't explain to me why I had what I had. Yeah. And so I just shied away from it, and was fortunate to have some knowledge that allowed me to have that stop. It grew really big, and then it stopped, and then it shrunk over a couple of years and stopped beating with my heart. And then about a year and a half after that, I didn't even know that it was going to get rid of it. I found out how to do some detox, and then it blew up like a balloon for about 2 weeks. And then it shrunk down to its normal size again and stayed there. And then within a year from that, my body dissolved it out of my body completely, and it just disappeared. And that was very fortunate to have just enough knowledge without having to go and really take different approaches, because when you're in that situation, they want to cut you wide open and do a whole bunch of stuff. And it was in an area where I didn't want anybody cutting with a knife. It was right around all the male plumbing and very sensitive area in the body. So I'm happy that it was there, but it did ever wake up a whole bunch of things. So your wake up on that, when you first started noticing things, was it your naturopath that picked it up first?
So I love that you mentioned this idea of body autonomy, that you didn't feel comfortable going the route of, let's say, conventional. For me, I did integrative. For me, that just felt right. And I think that's very important to highlight, because body autonomy is huge in terms of, for ourselves, being comfortable with the decision-making for our medical lives. So I just wanted to say that. But yes, for me, actually, yes. So at that point, when cancer came in 2014, July, it was probably my 10th year seeing the naturopath. Every year we would do blood work, vitamins, diet structure. He'd give me a whole bunch of stuff. And he looked at me and he's like, something is wrong, Savio. Like probably 3 or 4 things is what I'm thinking. But I need you to go to conventional medicine and get a sonogram, get it done. So I'm like, okay. So I got a sonogram done. They literally, after getting it done, they wouldn't let me leave the office for like an hour and a half. I thought, like, what's going on here? They told me to get a relative to come pick me up. I'm like, well, I have a car here. They're like, no, get your relative, have them pick you up. And my dad came, and took me to the hospital. And they said, go to the hospital. And then literally within an hour and a half, I was admitted to the 5th floor. And that same night, I heard nurses talking that I would be transferred to the 7th floor, which I heard them talking that it was called the cancer floor. So I had an idea it was cancer that night. And so for me, it was put up or shut up. And so I just promised myself that I was going to glean, listen, open myself up to what's happening, like not pretend it's not happening or not wanting it not to happen. It's happening, being present to it, and finding my way through the maze of healing. I'm just a different, like friends and family members are like, they kept telling me like I was going to be okay because they're like, you always get through things and all that. And that was nice to hear, but obviously you don't know. I just knew for myself that even though my physical body was at dis-ease, it literally was dying because I was stage 3, that there was other parts of my being that was much more vibrant. And so I wanted to pull myself from that debilitating cycle and into a more uplifting one.
Yeah, because a chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and you found there was a pretty significantly weak link in there. So you had to deal with it. You went through a very interesting path, because when these things happened to me, that was in 2004. And by 2006, I started to learn a little bit, enough, right? So that I could start to, at least not continually detoxifying my body with bad food, because I didn't understand the food thing. And then I never heard of integrative medicine, which I know you're going to chat about, until 2012. I didn't even hear the word. And by that time, my tumor was already gone. And there's a whole integrative thing that I really want you to educate people a little bit about here today. The first thing, the naturopath said, go get checked. You went and got checked, and they put you into a medical hospital. Was that hospital integrative at all?
No, not at all. I didn't even know I was going to. Usually when someone tells you you have cancer, there's a decision-making process there. I had zero decision-making process. It was like, go to the hospital, 5th floor, the next day, transfer to the 7th floor. The way cancer came into my life was my stomach started getting distended, bigger and bigger. And I was actually on a trip overseas with a friend. I was in London, Paris, and Amsterdam, and my sheets at night were drenched with sweat. I just assumed it was the environment. I was like, it's probably the environment. I don't know why I assumed that, but I did. And then I came home and it was like drenching night sweats. The stomach started getting bigger and bigger. And so basically for a week in the hospital, I was in the hospital for a total of 15 days. For a week, they had to put a nephrostomy tube in me and distend about 8 liters of fluid from my abdomen. So I was bedridden for a whole week. And then after that, 3 days before I left for those 15 days, the medical director came to me. She goes, listen, we've asked you a ton of questions. At that point, Ian, I probably saw I counted 19 different doctors. Literally, I felt like a VIP. I don't know what I deserved to get that treatment, but it was amazing. And they kept asking me these questions every day, like 3 or 4 questions, the same questions. So she goes, I know your history. I know you're someone who doesn't even take aspirin. But she goes, I'm telling you right now, Savio, if you do not do your first round of chemo before you leave this hospital, I cannot guarantee something will be positive happening. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So I relied heavily on a really good friend of mine. I've known her for a really long time, probably one of the wisest and probably the more spiritually aware people that I've known. And she even said to me, are you sure you want to do chemo? That ravages the body. It can kill the good and the bad. Are you sure you want to go that route? And I actually had to pause and I thought about it. And I mentioned this in my TEDx talk that there's a movie back in the day. Keanu Reeves played Little Buddha. He played Siddhartha in the movie. And there was a scene in the movie, and I tell this story over and over again because it's very important, because it was a flash of insights, like one of those revelation things. And I saw the scene in the movie that I haven't seen that movie for a really long time, where 2 people were on a boat, and Keanu Reeves as Siddhartha was meditating. He was at that point not eating anything. He was with a bunch of ascetics, and he heard 2 people on the fishing boat, and one of them had an instrument, and one of them goes, if you hold the string too tight, it will snap. And if you leave it too slack, it won't play. The path is the middle way. And I was like, flash of insight. I'm like, oh, okay, so I can do this chemo thing, but I can also do a whole bunch of integrated modalities once I'm out of the hospital. Little did I know I was going to be there for 15 days. But yeah, Ian, I did. I looked high and low. I set up a Google alert. I wanted to know everything about my cancer. I did energy medicine. I did ozone therapy. I did vitamins. I read the Quran. I read passages in there about the black seed oil. I did a whole bunch of stuff. In addition to the cycles, I had 6 rounds of chemo after I got out of the hospital. And I felt that for me, that was the right thing to do. It was my own body autonomy. And I'm happy to say that in 4.5 months after the cycles of chemo and the whole modalities that I did, I was given a remission status that December, so 4.5 months later. And this past December, it's been 9 years in remission. And so after 5 years, I decided to do something with it. And this is the path I'm walking. My goal and my mission is really to support cancer survivors, because you have a whole patient crew. You have a whole crew with you when you have cancer. You have zero help when you don't. They're all gone. Your family doesn't really understand. No one understands. And a part of you is missing. So my cancer was blood cancer, so I had no scars. But these individuals lost their breast, lost their throat, lost their colon. You cannot pretend it's not there. So how do you live with yourself with that loss, and then live with yourself in saying what's next? And so I help them really amplify their story, tell their message, find a 2.0 version of the self, build a better version and self-identity, and also create that momentum in their lives, whether that's writing a book, starting a podcast, or, being featured in an article. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm doing that by modeling that as a cancer survivor myself, because I've done all those things. So
right. Yeah, that's it. At that point, it's a very crucial moment to make a right decision. I had looked into people who have had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and that is the one single cancer diagnosis that responds very well, for whatever reason, to chemo. And it's something that, it is a deeply personal decision. And then it also gets you to take things a lot more seriously, because there's so many aspects of where did it come from? It came out of the blue. Like, you're not living a life that should have lent itself to that. But one of the things I learned is that your body right now, it breathes 11,000 liters of air a day, every single day. That means you breathe 4 million liters of air a year. And in the air are the most nasty things. It doesn't, people think, it's clear air because they can't see anything, but oxygen molecules are too small to see. So are nano razor blades. I talk about nano razor blades a lot. And if you get a $1 million electron microscope, you can see them in the air. They float, and they come from tire dust and from brake dust. They come from the cremation of bodies. There are many bodies of humans and animals cremated now. And when they get cremated, it releases it into the atmosphere. And the ashes don't go up because they have a filter for those things, because they're visible. Yeah. The invisible goes right out the stack, and it's in every neighborhood. So as much as we try to, eat clean and be mindful and conscious about things that we do and talk to our body nice, there's all these things that are there in the air that's the biggest thing you consume. So just depending on how you were exposed to what kind of toxins and chemicals, and also the mental thinking that deeply applies. So you had 8 liters withdrawn out of your abdomen. Wow. We only have 5 liters of blood in total. That's 3 liters more than the amount of blood you got in your body. And you have 5 liters of lymphatic fluid. So 10 liters total, and they pulled 8 that had blown up in you by your body trying to react, right? It was like, what's going on? It's trying to get rid of stuff and using fluid from all over your body, because you're 80% fluid, not water. What an intense thing to go through. So that experience, what was it like? So it sounds like everybody treated you really kindly, and they were very concerned. Like you said, you felt like a VIP. It was really interesting.
I was there for 15 days. And for the first week, because I was bedridden, I only had Wi-Fi and my phone. At that point, I counted 3 roommates. I had 4 roommates in total. 2 of them had brain cancer because they had to go for radiation in and out. So I heard them. Wow. And I think it's my personality and the way I am. But, the doctors had to do a bone marrow aspiration, and they kept telling me, this is going to hurt. People have screamed, kicked us, spit at us, yelled at us, cursed at us. So I'm just warning you. I'm like, okay, all right. So they did it. And, I was sweating profusely. Beyond that, they're like, wait, this is crazy. You're just like, we've told people they had cancer. We've given them a bone marrow aspiration. And you're just like, this doesn't even faze you. And I'm like, oh, no, it's fazing me. But I looked at them and I'm like, what do you expect me to do? I said, I'm not someone who's just going to crumble. This is happening to me. This is real, and it's happening to me. But the only way out of this mess is for me to do what I do best, which is assess the situation and figure out a way forward, whatever that, even if it's an inch forward. And so I had that zeal and that zest for doing that. And I think that just really comes down to my own personal motivation and drive. There was a part of my TEDx that most people don't know when they see it. Before the TEDx went on, I was the first person to go. It was 10 of us. And they had mic issues. Not once, not twice, 3 times. And they said to me, the way you handle that was so professional. You didn't get angry. And because this was someone after I did the TEDx talk in the audience. It was like 225 people in the audience. And I said to them, are you kidding me? I'm a New Yorker. I said, I've been through 9/11, the dot-com crash. I've lost money on like a business, like lots of money on a business. And I've had cancer. I said, bring it on. If they wanted me to do it 20 more times, I would have done it 20 more times. So I'm just saying that because I think not only does it come down to personality, it also comes down to will, and it comes down to vision. I didn't know if I was going to survive this, to be honest with you. I mean, even though friends and family said I was going to, I just knew that if I did my best and unearthed whatever I could unearth, all the resources, all the tools I could unearth, I made it literally my primary mission. I focused like a laser beam on the healing. And I told people that, now I'm a board certified wellness coach. At this point, I've interviewed 200 cancer survivors, so I'm a media journalist. And basically, after interviewing 200 of them, my editor came to me and said, this needs to be a book. So I highlighted 35 of their stories and told my own, like about 2 years ago. It became a bestseller. And to me, all that really, really means is that the story of hope survives. And that's what I want people to get out of. My life and what I've been through and what I've sort of hopefully and thankfully have overcome is just a testament to the fact that you have to create this ideal version of yourself that's much more than your reality is at the moment, because our realities can really be complete negations of what we want to create in the world.
Right. And this particular malady is not age related. It hits people at any age. And I had an experience with the non-Hodgkin lymphoma with a friend. This is way back early in the journey in 2008. It was a young woman. She was 20 years old, and she was diagnosed with it. And she ran into people who said, just only do a natural, that's it, just natural only. We met her along her journey and supported her whichever way we could, but we didn't have much time nor knowledge around those things. She went to all the health institutes that are, down in San Diego. She went to Optimal and tried all kinds of things. She did everything from like the raw vegan world to, again, all the modalities and her parents were very upset with that because they just wanted her to go the medical route. And they were like very much medical route only. And she didn't have her own money at the time to pay. And so her parents paid, and they kept saying to her, you get to a certain place. If you don't get success by this particular time, then would you please come home and do chemo? And so, they were using that as a method of coercion almost.
Yeah.
And the thing is, she didn't know the real research, and really nobody around her did. And nobody was talking about how responsive the body is to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so she went through this until she was very compromised. Like, it was serious stuff. She was, it was getting like congestion. She didn't have that blow up like you had with the distension, but she was getting weaker and sicker. And this goes over the period of about 2 years.
Oof.
And I would check in on her once in a while just to see how she was doing. And she got to a point where her parents said, that's enough of enough. You've got to get home. She lived in Montreal, Quebec. And when she got home, her parents immediately took her to the hospital. They did the first round of chemo, like just the first day. And she was going to the hospital and coming back. She wasn't staying in the hospital. And so she came home that night and called me. And she said, I can't believe how sick I feel. I've never felt worse in my life. But she was so compromised by that point. Can you imagine going 2 years like that and not being successful? And she goes, I'm so sick, please send me whatever you can. And so I sent a package to her, and the next day we got a call that she passed away. That's how bad it was. Her body could not handle that under any circumstance. She was so weakened. And so everybody wanted to blame the chemo, and it wasn't blaming the chemo. It was the fact that they had not taken the right steps early enough to deal with it. And that was this huge backlash, in their family. Can you imagine at 22 years old passing away from that when something could have been done? And she did nothing integrative at all and didn't know about it either. And we were like, I'm not a person who deals with people who have cancer. I just don't do that because that's a very serious situation that you need to pay attention to and get as much help from wherever you can as possible And then people will come to me over the years and, oh, we heard you were a cancer survivor. I said, under no circumstance was I a cancer survivor. I would never accept the title of cancer, number one, because it was just a tumor there. I don't know where it came from. And the fact that my body finally dissolved it away was a super unique situation. I can't go and say, oh, well, if you do this, this, and this is what I did. Are you kidding? Everybody's totally different, and everybody has a certain specific reason. I don't have a crystal ball or be able to tell. I've never, ever helped somebody who had cancer get rid of their cancer. This is not the way it works. Yep. And I'm not a doctor. I would tell people who would come to me and I say, okay, listen, you need to go to a doctor. Okay. You need to go to a naturopath. You need to go, once I learned about integrative, you need to go integrate. Well, it's so much money. Okay. Well, is money more important than your life? Seriously. There's places in Europe you can go. You can go immediately and they start doing all kinds of tests and they can help you. But people don't want to mortgage their home. I got to a point where I said, well, wow, you won't even have to worry about your mortgage payments or your house or anything if you don't take this much more seriously. I cannot help you, literally. I can support you, but I can't help you. It's like it's a life and death situation. And I'm so glad you didn't play around with that. You were given grace to go and have those things. And here you are today, at amazing levels of health. And now you can get healthier and healthier every day going into the future. You're accessing things that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to, if you tried to just go all natural.
Well, there are a lot of people who came to me and said, why do you think that happened to you? Or, they have a reason. And this scripture says this, or this belief system says this. And I look at them and I say, honestly, I don't know the cause of the effect of why it happened. It happened to me. I have two choices. I can either live in that pain or I can try to move forward and learn something from the pain. And so I decided to learn something from the pain. And people then say to me, well, how come you don't support cancer, people who have cancer? I said, first of all, I am board certified as a coach. I'm not a doctor. And second of all, I did an integrative step in my healing journey. That may or may not work for someone else. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But at the end of the day, I do know one thing. You need to take your responsibility for where you are in your life at this moment in time. So however you want to find that healing, however you want to find a remedy to that malady, then that's your mission. That's your goal. That's what you need to get deeper in, lean into it, and gain and garner the wisdom from people who know a lot more than you do about it. So I love that you mentioned it because, even the doctors, when I was there, they kept saying to me, like one doctor who actually told me my diagnosis, DLBCL, he whispered to me, he goes, you have DLBCL, but he's like, don't worry. If you're going to get a cancer, it's the best cancer to get. And I was like, looking at him like, what? And then he said to me, we have an amazing drug called Rituxan. So he said, you're going to get R-CHOP. So it was like Rituxan plus like four others. Couldn't even pronounce their names, except for one called vincristine. Looked beautiful. It was like a beautiful red gelatinous thing. And I remember at the chemo bay, and I remember saying to the nurse, is that going in me? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay. That red gelatinous jelly thing is going to go in me. She's like, yeah. But they kept telling me, whatever it was, whatever the combination was in, whatever I did, or I don't know. All I know is I made survival my mission. I wanted to focus. So I let everything else go. I focused only on that. I even let work go. I even told people, listen, I love you, but I can't hang out with you because I can't take on that energy. I'm a sensitive person. I'm like, I need to just be with myself and do my healing. Even my dad said to me, you want to come to the chemo bay with you? I'm like, Dad, you staring at me for 5 hours and I'm getting chemo is not going to help me. It's going to actually make me more self-conscious. So thank you. Mm-hmm. But I think the best thing you could do is pick me up, maybe because they say don't drive after that. So he used to come pick me up.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I met a guy in 2010. His name was Sean Stevenson. They called him the 3-foot giant. Have you ever heard of Sean?
I think I might have heard of Sean in passing. I don't know too much about him, but yeah.
Well, he did a really powerful talk on TEDx Prison.
Oh.
And it's all about pity. Where he said the worst drug in the world is when you pity yourself or you pity others.
100%.
And he said, I want to, rid the world of insecurity. That was his mission. And one of the things he said early on when I first met him, he did this, the day I met him, I was at a thing called Consumer Health Summit in Stanford. And he rolled around in his wheelchair in the middle of 42 of us. And he told his story. He had osteoarthritis and his body will, most babies are like 98% of the babies who have that die at birth because all their bones shatter on the way out, and his did. But there was a team of doctors in Chicago who put him back together again, and he did survive. And then he learned in his life about how to deal with that. You'd have to just go and see his story. But the main thing that he said that I thought was so cool, the way he framed it, he said, that did not happen to me, it happened for me. No matter what obstacle or challenge he had in his life, he always said, that happened for me. Remember, that's for me, not to me. And so that kind of flips the script on those things really beautifully. It was rolling around it. He said, I know that every one of you today are thinking in your minds, that poor little man, isn't that awful? He has to live in a body like that. He has to be in a wheelchair. He didn't get a power chair. He's using his arms. He figured out how to build his muscles stronger and have good, strong muscles. And he said, I can read all your minds. He said, I wouldn't trade my body for any of yours altogether. I would never have learned what I learned or be who I am today if I had gone through that. And people would pay him because it was worth it. He would be talking to entrepreneurs who had a business and they had cash flow. And they would pay him $100,000 for one day with him. He would spend 8 hours and go through them from front to back. I never had the opportunity to do that. But he would like tear them down and show them so much stuff about themselves because he knew. He was so humbled to just like, there's just nothing left but this. And it's really cool that you knew, just how to stay chill, stay calm, go through it. Getting all upset and scrunching your face when they're taking the bone marrow. And, that doesn't help. That just makes it worse. You're anticipating something bad instead of just going, hey, let's just get this done, please. Yeah. We have to do this. I'm not going to help by freaking out.
And I also believe in the energy of like reciprocity. There's no point in me, like there was a couple of roommates that were yelling and screaming at the nurses and doctors. For me, that's just wasted energy. For me, right. That's not, they're there to do a job. They're there to give me healing. It's a place of healing. And so I had to lean into that so I was just extra cordial. I was extra nice because they're taking care of me. And so some of them were like the energy of reciprocity. Some of them were like, it looks like you really like that, that meal. Here's some extra food. Like they would just be like really kind, as much kind as they could be. And at the end of the day, what's the point, at least for me, what's the point of being all angry and negative? Although I will say that same friend who told me about the, why do you, are you sure you want to do chemo? She did say to me when I told her that I had one of these roommates, I'm like literally yelling and screaming at the nurses horribly. And she said to me, she goes, you don't understand something. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, he's scared of dying. She's like, you're different than him? And I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. I was like, you're right. It was fear that was causing the anger. And I didn't even realize it because I'm just built differently in that sense, or at least life has shown me different things to build. And so thank you for mentioning that because that's really an important point this idea is, where are you right now in your feeling, in your expression? And do you want to contain it, or do you want it to go somewhere positive, or do you want it to go somewhere negative? And, I will say a large part of how I handled cancer was just the fact that I was a seeker for most of my life, and life had given me a lot of challenges to get stronger as a person. And so I think cancer if it had to have happened to me, I think at that moment in time, it was the right time for it to happen because I was strong enough to face it, because I think a lot of people run from it.
For sure, yeah. And even the people who are screaming and yelling at the doctors and nurses understand that this person is in a very compromised state. That's the only way that person can express the release of the pressure they feel. And even though it's anger, I don't think the people really mean it. And the doctors and nurses know that. Like, they would never want to have that done to them or ever be in that position. So it's an empathy thing. It's like, if you're going to scream and yell, we understand. It's not like the end of the world. If you can't control your emotions, we understand. And it's a hard job. Like, being a doctor and a nurse is no easy task. That's for sure. And we don't appreciate them enough. I've always respected the medical establishments. I was never against them. The only thing that disappointed me in the doctors I was dealing with was that they were guessing about why I had what I had. Because I didn't let a diagnosis come in with the title. I didn't have what you had. I had this growth, that was growing, and it was very dangerous. I just said, I can't go your way because you guys can't tell me why. Therefore, I can't take the treatment. But I was always respectful. So my oldest brother was a medical doctor for 30 years in North Bay, Ontario. He was a general practitioner. And when I was going through this, I was talking to him because he wasn't my doctor. And I was seeing specialists in Toronto, and he said, listen, you have got to go through and follow through with everything they're telling you have to do. You need surgery. You have to do these things because you don't know what's going on. And he said, I have had thousands of patients come through my clinic, and not that he dealt directly with them. He had 11 doctors working in the clinic alongside of him that he owned. And he said, I've seen all walks of life, from every nationality, every religion, every walk of life, different people on different diets. He said, I've seen people party their face off and eat out of the dumpster and live till they're 94. I've seen people who lived, organically and juiced and were conscious and die at 36. And he said, it's all genetic predisposition. It's just your genetics. I looked like my Uncle Don, and I was only 46.
Yeah.
My Uncle Don died at 51 of cancer. My Uncle Bob died 2 days before him of the same year at 54 of liver cancer that blew up. My Uncle Don had thyroid cancer that metastasized all the way through his system. When they opened him up, they just sewed him up and said, please get your affairs in order. And I'm being told that I'm like that. But that's like, what? No, I'm like me. I don't care if I look like Uncle Don. That doesn't mean that I'm going to do what he did. And I just felt so uncomfortable when I saw the doctors guessing it a few times. And, when I went away from them, my brother told my mom that I was committing suicide. I was like, hold it now. Just hang on here. Pattern interrupt. You guys let me figure this thing out as best as I can. Give me at least a 24-month window. Well, you don't even have that much time. Well, how do you know? Am I going to project it upon myself that I should give in? And you were in a situation totally different. You took responsibility by making your decisions, and you made some very good decisions along the way that allowed you to be where you are now. And as a result, you learned so much. Can you imagine if that had never happened? You wouldn't have all this knowledge. There's no way you'd know.
I wouldn't even do the work that I'm doing. I was an IT guy before cancer happened. I ended up then, getting my board certification. I had, a journalism, writing background. So I ended up, doing a series on I Survived Cancer. Here's how I did it, which then blew up to 200 interviews, which then led into my best-selling book about cancer survivorship, which then my TEDx talk is about my journey into cancer, but also giving people a call to action and how to figuring out what that inner stranger is. Like my inner stranger was not only my cancer, but shame, because cancer really brought out this idea of shame within me. And so I do a lot of work with individuals as a coach to figure out, okay, this horrible thing happened to you. Now what you want your life to be, what is the persona you want to create? What's the legacy you want to create? Who do you want to express in the world right now? And as a journalist last week, I covered the Integrative Healthcare Symposium in New York City. And there's this one doctor. He's graduated from an extremely good school, was a doctor in the hospital. And he's like, I got so burnt out that I ended up becoming an equities trader. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I gave up my medical practice to be an equities trader. But he's like, I realized it wasn't fulfilling me. So he's like, now I want to be a functional medical doctor. And I'm telling that story because I think when it comes to healthcare and wellness, because I bounce on this, right? I cover the area of wellness, healthcare. They're siloed. And now there's an integrative sort of piece to it, but they're still siloed. And there's big pharma and people have all these opinions. At the end of the day, I don't think they're talking to each other in a very cohesive way. And I think that's where the breakdown of the structure is, because then people like us or people like you say, okay, which path do I have to follow? Just the straight and narrow one, or the one that's curving to the left, or the one that's curving to the right, or both, or entwined. And it just gets really, 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 really confusing. So I'm glad you mentioned.
Right. We look for the middle of the road as best as we can. If something significant happened to me, I would definitely, be very thankful for the medical establishment and their ability to do things that are acute, versus like maybe an injury accident or something that just comes out of the blue, like what happened with you. I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm bulletproof or something ridiculous like that. We're in fragile bodies that we want to maintain that fragility by shielding ourselves from those toxins that are coming in. It's like what I'm drinking here today is electrolytic fluid that I make every day. And it's simple to make. And I ran into a guy who found out that if you drink unrefined sea salt in water at a very specific amount, which is just 5 grams per liter, that this is the raw material that your body uses with your bone marrow to produce very high quality volumes of blood.
Oh, wow.
Because your body is a blood production facility. And I started drinking it, and it changed my entire physical being within 12 months, so much so I was shocked. And I started at 64 years old. And by the way, age no longer means anything to me.
Yep.
It's irrelevant, right? The only thing that's relevant about age is that the older you get, the better you get, because you're learning more.
Correct.
And I don't accept any of the paradigm where people truly believe that as you get older, you should expect certain things. I only expect to get healthier and to feel better, to have more energy, more stamina, more endurance, better brain function, better digestion, better respiratory, better circulatory, better immune system, better everything, because that's the actual way it is.
Yep.
Just think about yourself. Over the last 10 years, you've gotten better and better and better and better and better at what you're doing. And tomorrow, you're going to be better tomorrow than you are today. And that's the trajectory that we can all get onto. But because of the mainstream media and all the people who are trying to indoctrinate us or using propaganda to make us think that we should expect certain things. I am now 65 years old, turning 66 in June. Therefore, you should have a certain thought pattern about whatever. No. And the other thing you mentioned was fear. And the extreme fear of someone in a hospital with a problem like a glioblastoma multiforme level 4 brain tumor. And they're told, this is terminal, okay?
Correct.
We are going to open you up. We are going to dig out as much as we can. We are going to hit you with radiation for 6 weeks. Otherwise, if you don't do it, you're going to be dead literally in weeks. And we're going to put chemo in there to clean it up. And you will maybe survive a year. Can you imagine that being told to you? That's heavy-duty fear. And what's interesting is my brother, who was the medical doctor for 30 years, in 2010, in November of 2010, he woke up one morning and he couldn't talk and he couldn't understand anything that his girlfriend was telling him. And it was the first day of an around-the-world journey in his sailboat that he prepared for 5 years. And they were just south of Panama City on the buoy. The boat was all ready to go. They had all the food, everything prepped. They were heading to Fiji. And it was just this terrible thing. So they rushed him into the hospital. They thought he was having a stroke. He wasn't. It was a herpes simplex virus that went up and it went into his left communication center and shut everything down. And he spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Most people die in 48 hours from that. And they scanned him. They saw nothing in his brain. All they knew is that this is obviously what was going on. He was in ICU for 3 weeks. And they gave him all the meds and he came out of that. He survived, and he came home in December. He was in there for almost a month. And he came home to Canada in December, shut the whole trip down, put the boat back on the hard, and kept getting these seizures, a little bit more, a little bit longer throughout the day, like 2 or 3 times a day. It would be 30 seconds. He just couldn't do anything. And on January 2nd, 2011, he woke up with a headache that wouldn't go away. They took him to the hospital. They scanned him. He had a glioblastoma multiforme level 4. And they did all the procedures. He refused the chemo in the end because it made him feel so sick. And he passed away within 3 months in March of 2011. And it was like, wow, that's so heavy duty intense. It was a massive shock to our family that this happened so fast. And he was only 61 years old. These are things that you see happen. At least they saved him for that moment. But what do you do with that? It's too intense. There are things that you can do early on. If you catch it as that infection, right, in the brain and deal with the infection, then yeah, it doesn't advance. But yeah, cancer is a very mysterious thing. That is,
like you mentioned, it's a very physical thing that happens to you. And when it's happening to you, if you're lucky enough to survive it, people think, okay, you're good, you're lucky. But no, all that stuff that happened to you physically, it changes you as a person. And right. I'm in the business of helping people understand that because I did the work for myself to try to understand, and I'm still doing the work to try to understand it myself as well. From the head, heart, and gut perspective, from an emotional perspective, a mental perspective, your relationships with other people, your dreams at night. What are you dreaming about? Your connection to a higher source, God, universe. Is my soul still in my body? Like, what's happening there? I think it's very important, like you said, to try to catch it early. But if it happens to you, try to find a way through it in the best possible way with grace.
Yeah, that's the thing. And the fear factor, there's 5 different fears. The fear of poverty, the fear of illness, fear of criticism, the fear of old age, and the fear of death. And that was explained very thoroughly in that book called Outwitting the Devil. Have you ever heard of that book?
Yeah, I've heard of that. And I have to add another one, the fear of public speaking. Because they did a survey on it, and they actually said that people fear more public speaking than they do death. So I was like, okay, I faced the death thing. Let me do the public speaking. So I did that in October. My TEDx came out. So I'm like, okay, I got 2 of them down. I got 2 of them.
That's funny. Fear of public speaking is a heart racing, head full of, it purges all your thinking out of yourself, right?
Because people are staring at you, waiting on bated breath for your next word. And if you mess up, like you're like self-conscious, and then you're like, am I awkward up here? Am I saying the right thing? Am I going to like go off on a tangent? And so I put myself through the fire. I wanted to do it on purpose because I said in 2023, what's my biggest fear? And it was honestly for public speaking, not like speaking to the public, like not in a panel or forum or a podcast, or it's not that I'm very comfortable with. It's just literally standing up and waiting for people to listen to everything you're saying. And I did it in Raleigh, North Carolina in front of 225 people. And now it's out there for the world to enjoy. And at this point, I think it's gotten 35,000 views, which is, it's only been out for like 6 weeks. So I'm really happy that that message is landing, which is this idea of how to love that inner stranger and how to also know thyself is to heal thyself. I think those are 2 powerful things. And then I also mentioned a framework in there called the Aloha Framework.
I was given a couple of clues about public speaking and or speaking to a camera, because that camera is connecting with thousands, even millions of people potentially. And the audience that you're speaking to, like, can you imagine if you were speaking to an audience of a whole bunch of professionals in that subject matter? You're like, whoa, okay, I got to talk at a level that's talking to these people. You are the script. That's the cool thing. I think you found that out when you got up on the stage, right? That you are the script. You don't need to follow a script per se. You just need to know the points you're making. And a friend of mine, his name is Cameron Harold, and he's a totally awesome guy. And he told me, this is way back in 2012, he said, if you're going to go and speak somewhere, or you're going to speak to a camera, or you're going to be interviewed, always make sure that you set your mind as you are an uninformed enthusiast. The world's amazing. Everything is going great. Even if the world's burning down around you, don't worry about it. You have to have the mindset of an uninformed enthusiast. And that makes you kind of laugh. It's like, yeah, I don't know anything except for I know everything's awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm here today to share the things that mean a lot, that'll bring value to the people listening, no matter who they are. How intellectual brainiacs to people just, haven't heard anything hardly about the subject matter. And just let it go. It's going to be good, And we're here for them. We're not here for us. If I'm worried about me, I'm an uninformed enthusiast. And talk to the camera like a person, or talk to the crowd as people. They're there to hear you, and they're drawing on you. And engage them. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about them to start with. Engage them by saying, you're here today because you are interested in expanding your ability, your value. You're here today to learn really important things. And by the way, I'm here today to share some really cool stuff with you. And then that engages them immediately because you made them the front of your talk, and then they're like, oh, okay, wow, this guy's cool. But he must have something fun to say.
Well, it's also reframing, right? To me, it was getting the structures in place, right? I hired a speaker coach to get me, because TEDx is very clear. You have a certain amount of time to get your thoughts across. So memorization helps you because it helps you clarify what you're going to say so you don't go off on a tangent. But also, like you said, this isn't a lecture. This isn't a piece of writing. This is a talk. So you need to make it engaging and storytell. And that's what I did. I was like, what can I tell about my life that's both crippling, searing, but funny, hilarious, that's deeply interesting and deeply profound? And so I tried to make that soup, as they say, and people seem to enjoy it, which I was happy to do. Yeah, I actually, spoiler alert, I sang a little bit, and I'm not a singer. I put it out there on purpose.
Right. It's sort of throwing a little bit of entertainment into it. Definitely it has to be very entertaining and intriguing. And using humor really embeds those thoughts. I think humor is one of the best things to embed the thought into the people, that they will always remember that.
Absolutely. And actually someone even said, they're like, with those mic issues that you don't see when you see the TEDx, they're like, you showcase resilience. Your talk about resilience, you showcased it before you gave us a glimpse of what that actually is in the real world. Because he's like, you didn't even phase, you weren't angry, you weren't pissed. I'm like, no, this is what I came here to do, a job. And that's the same way I treated cancer. I don't know if I'm going to get through this, but I came here to do a job, and this is happening to me or for me. And now I have to figure out a way so that I can adequately make sense of it and try to overcome it. Because I think the greatest thing we have in life beside this idea of hope is this idea that we can overcome. I think when you're down and out, I think latching on to that one concept, that there's always a way to overcome, can get you through the darkest of times.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It wakes up a lot of things that otherwise would be slumbering. And so when you're delivering information to people now, what's the big piece of gold that you have learned that everyone needs to hear about that will really move the needle for them?
I probably would say it was my call to action in my TEDx talk. So I speak of something called the Aloha Reboot. I got it through my own discovery and healing practice in Hawaii called Huna Healing, but it's called Ho'oponopono. And basically it's this idea of talking to yourself like your whole self, your body selves, without sounding like a crazy person, talking to yourself in private and talking to those body parts and really letting go and releasing things, having self-forgiveness, self-compassion. And it's a very simple framework. It's ALOHA. And A is just this idea of acknowledge. Acknowledge that present moment of where you are. Take that deep breath or feel into that surrounding. L is really listening to that inner voice, that internal conversations with different parts of your body. And as simply as asking how it feels or what it needs to feel better. O is really this idea of opening yourself up to that idea of self-compassion and self-forgiveness. But the key ingredient, and I'm someone who is getting better at this, is to be kind to yourself as you would to a friend or a stranger or a loved one. Because I know I'm infinitely kind to people, but I'm not always very kind to myself because I always want to do better or try to do better. And H is really this harnessing idea, harness that wisdom from within, pay close attention to those sacred spaces. I call it the three brains, head, heart, and gut. I'm trained in embodiment and somatic work where it's using the body as a resource for more information. Consciousness flows through and from those areas. They say the heart is really the biggest area and your gut is really the seat of courage. And then A is really this idea of just acting upon those parts, making them feel safer, healthy, and whole. But if I was to sum up right now, my biggest point to make when I'm in front of clients or when I'm giving a talk is really this idea of just coming into your own and having those conversations with yourself. I call it the Aloha Reboot. People can call it whatever they want, but it's really taking that time, not only meditating, but taking that time to really get to know self. Because when cancer happened to me, the only way for me to make sense of it all was to go deeper within. That's the only way that I knew how. And fortunately for me, I had a bedrock of understanding because I was a long-time meditator when cancer happened to go within. But really, cancer helped me unearth those shadow parts of myself, helped me unearth this idea of becoming more emotionally alive. I thought feelings and emotions were kind of one and the same. And cancer really taught me that. And cancer taught me the greatest lesson of all, this idea of vulnerability. I had to actually lean on to people to help me. I had to lean on to doctors, nurses, my dad, my mom, cooking. I had to lean on to people that I never thought I would, being my age. I was 38 at the time. And so I would say that's really my greatest point that I would like to make is that I start off my TEDx talk with the question, have you ever struggled to see your own reflection? And I did that on purpose because I've struggled with that my whole life. What is it to be human? People talk about this idea of purpose. Okay, individual purpose, that's a very important point, but what are we all doing here, Ian? Literally floating on this giant rock in space. It's mind-blowing if you really think about it all. And so I often tell people, don't look so insular, look outside of yourself and look within to figure out and make sense of all that.
Right. Yeah, like where are we?
Exactly.
Who are we?
100%.
What are we doing? Where are we going? What is this all about?
100%. And, people often say to me, they're like, I've interviewed Venus Williams, I've interviewed Ice-T, I've interviewed Deborah Messing, Carson Kressley, like, you interviewed all these, like, rock stars. Don't you get nervous? No, they're human. Some of them have more problems than we do, or some have less problems than we do. But even with Venus Williams, it was a great interview because she was launching a wellness brand, and she's like, people look at me as the epitome of sports, but I'm going through my own digestive situation. It's hindering my ability to perform the way I want to. So I think the key is to just be honest and frank with what we're all going through. We're all living these lives and we all have stumbling blocks. And I think really the key is just to get to know yourself better so that way you can adequately become a better person to other people.
Right. And your spirit, it's the environment outside of yourself and the environment within yourself spiritually mentally, emotionally, physically, and even financially. It ties in very much because there's more money than there is air, but people think, oh, well, what happens if the economy crashes? Well, what does that have to do with you?
Yeah.
You're as valuable as you were before a crash or after a crash. Don't judge yourself based upon what the world around you is doing. It's your universe. We're not in their universe. They want us to be in their universe as if we can then be manipulated and controlled in their universe. No, you're in your universe. You are the one who pays the price if you make a bad decision. You are the one who gets the reward when you make a good decision. Every thought you have is your thought. And if you allow a thought to come in that is not correct, it's still your thought. If you allow yourself to be influenced because everybody else is doing it, it's still yours. And if everybody made a wrong decision around you and you chose to avoid the criticism of not making that decision and everybody looking at you going, what's wrong with you? Well, I'm in my universe and my decisions have results. I have to be very careful. If 8 billion people decided to do something that is not right, let them go ahead and do that. I'm not trying to change their decision. If they ask me why I am deciding the opposite, I can tell them. If they invite me to, sure. But yeah, it's wonderful to be in that position where you've now gone through all those things and you're going to get better and better and better at that as time goes on. And the older you get, the more valuable you are to everyone around you. And that's why having a longer life here is so important. But I don't want to have a long life if my body's falling apart. What would be the value of that? People talk about blue zones and how more people live till 100. Look at them at 100. They're not doing well at all.
I know. Like my dad, he has like knee issues. And I'm like, he wouldn't want to just have another 30 years with knee issues. He just wouldn't want to do that, actually. But I hear what you're saying. And it's 100% correct. Dan Buettner, right? The blue zone guy. He talks about real age and how we can, and that's wonderful. I think that's great. But you have to want to feel better. You want to actually have vitality. Not just get older for the sake of getting older. You want to actually, if you're going to feel that way or live that long, you're going to want to feel better. And so that's where this idea of wellness and illness, and that's why my editor trusts my eye when I cover these events. I've covered retreats in Italy and just came back from India for December. I went with National Geographic and do a lot of work with them. And my idea of wellness and illness is like, he said, you understand it completely. You know that it's a continuum. Being well and having illness is two different things. What's the middle ground between all those two things? And so that's really what I strive to do every day. I try to model it, not only model it, I try to be humble and I try to learn and I try to just be a better contributing person in society and just try to let go of my own insecurities and my own, foibles. And I think that's all we can do as people.
Right. Yeah. My journey led me to come to the realization at one point that there are keys along the way, and then there are master keys. So the master keys open up all the locks. The keys only open up a few locks. So when you get the master keys and you have the complete set, all the biggest locks are unlocked, and then your body goes back to the biological age of around a 21 to 25-year-old. It also goes back to the structural age of a 21 to 25-year-old, because if you don't have both of them, you might have really great health internally with organ function and cellular health, but you're getting old and stiff and tired and worn out, and you need a new hip and a new knee, and you got all these aches and pains, and that's where you see all the older people, they're all like that. And I just knew that there was information out there somewhere that we didn't have yet, and I was following all these experts and gurus and sages in the sense that I was not following them like they're my leader, but they had something of important things to say. And then I watched each one of them get old and die. And not all of them have yet, but they're getting old and they're dying. And I thought, wow, that's really messed up.
Yeah.
They're supposed to know how to keep the body healthy. And if your body's getting healthier every day, you just keep living. Mm-hmm. You don't even think about living a long time or dying because your body's getting better and better every day. That allowed me to open up a space and say, well, there's a space of knowledge that I don't have and they don't have, obviously, because they died. Yeah. But yet that knowledge has to exist. So what if we just humbled ourselves and realized we don't know but the knowledge is there. And what if we could know? And then that allowed all that thoughts to come in, where I know I didn't figure anything out. I didn't discover anything. It discovered me.
Yeah.
And I was given these keys that I'm now just to give to people. They don't need me. I don't want to be their leader. All right. I want them to be their own leader with the keys, right? So I give them the keys. Now they have the keys. Why would they need me anymore? But they still need me. I haven't done my job. And so getting that's a movement of information, no matter what anybody else is doing. That's what we do. And it involves us, but it doesn't require us ongoing. Just think about your hormonal system. Your hormonal system in your body is running the show in the background at the highest level. If your hormones go off at all, it's going to wreak havoc in different body systems. That's a little clue. And then there's just simple things that you can do, like things that you can actually do without any help from somebody else. If you could find out what those things were and they changed your entire picture, would you be interested? If you have not been able to handle that yourself, you do have to reach out at that point to integrative medicine or whatever it is that you have to reach out to at that point. Don't be a fool and don't be proud. You were humbled significantly through your journey, right? I mean, that's amazing.
But I was also open to it. I was open to being humble because I said, life is showing me something here. I can either ignore it or I confront it and do something about it. And so I decided the only course of action was to confront it and do something about it. And I don't think it's even singular to me. I think people come to that realization because it's do or die, literally do or die. I think the key is, like you said, to just ask the questions, be humble, and just open yourself up to whatever the wisdom, whatever is shining in front of you.
I have a favorite saying that a friend of mine coined years ago, back in the 90s, even maybe back in the 80s. I didn't hear it till the 90s. He said, it's live, die, sink, or swim. Which would you like?
Wow. Love it.
Right. You want to crest every wave.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have a good, solid hull. Get through, get on the journey. Stay safe. And know that you're safe, not this stay safe from something fictitious. Mm-hmm. There's real challenges and real dangers out there that we don't go with no fear. We want to fear things that could tear us apart, but we do not want to fear all those other things that we're taught through this matrix to fear. And we get out of that matrix and we have no fear, and perfect love casts out all fear. Have you seen that movie that was done by Angel.com called After Death?
No, I've not seen it.
It's really fascinating because they took a look at the thousands of different experiences people had when they died, and then they somehow came back, whether it was through medical intervention or whatever it was. And they had all these experiences, and they found the people who had the most profound experiences, and they made a movie around it and went back into and they took a very scientific approach, because it is very scientific how that person's body died. Yeah. And then somehow it came back. And what those people experienced, not everybody has NDEs. Mm-hmm. There's actually very few. And you think there's thousands of them, but there's how many billions of people that have lived, right? But it was just fascinating to watch it and just to let that sit there and go, wow, okay, I'm learning something here. Very fascinating.
Yeah. I think the key is for us to sort of understand for ourselves, why is this happening? And figure out for ourselves, what can I do about it? And I call it fear responsibly, right? Have that fear initiate or have that fear articulate for you what your next step is. Because I think if you just get caught up in the fear, it makes you sink. So I just tried to float, and then I tried to swim, and I somehow made it to the shore, and hopefully I could still be at shore. I get checked. I get scanned once a year. I don't have to. They tell me after 5 years I didn't have to, but just for my own mental sanity, I feel like I have to do it, emotional sanity as well. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. And yeah, I'm living and trying to be the best example I can be to other people who, I tell people all the time, if you're going to have a coach, I'm not the coach you want, because no one wants cancer. No one wants to survive cancer, because they know what they've been through. But if you do have it and you do survive, I'm here to help you figure out for yourself what the next moves are, not only for your own personal life, but just what do you want to create in the world, right? And how does that get expressed through your artistic or creative abilities, whether that's starting a business or writing a book or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and every person on this earth, they are very intelligent, whether they're told so or not. And every person has a super gift within them of some sort. And most people never get to discover it because they, first of all, don't believe that. Maybe. or they were never given the opportunity to go through a challenge to have that gift emerge and show up. And, we look at other people with these super gifts. We think, wow, it's amazing. Well, what about you?
Yeah.
You got a super gift. Not just a gift. It's something profound.
Yep.
And it's going to come out, and that's cool. You definitely come a long ways. It's just great to see. And congratulations on going through all that and just being chill and taking, the bull by the horns, so to speak, and just getting into that flow state where everything just started to sort itself out. And here you are now. And, I always tell everybody, we're just getting started. Remember, we're just getting started.
Just getting started.
Don't talk to me about how old you are. Right? Okay. Because we're really tapping into the things that are going to amplify everything.
Yeah.
And let's get every link, let's get it strengthened to the maximum.
And I just have to echo, because you're right, because that's the work I do with coaching. It's about bringing out that superpower, right? We all have something, and cancer might have stolen something from you, but it didn't steal that superpower from you. That's still there. It might be bruised and hurt, but it's there, and you just have to activate it.
That's right. And then you see it come to fruition.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time and investing the time for others. There's a lot of people who are going to see this podcast.
Okay.
This has been a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. And I look forward to further conversations in the future.
Okay.
So is there one last thing you'd like to say before we go?
I would just like to repeat again my mantra, which is to know thyself is to heal thyself. If anyone wants to find out more information about me, it's very simple. Savio Clemente, CLEMENT.com. There you can get coaching, get my newsletter. You can see my TEDx talk, which is called 7 Minutes to Wellness, How to Love Your Inner Stranger. You can find that on YouTube. And my socials, I'm at The Human Resolve. I'm on literally every social network on that handle. So thank you again, Ian. Appreciate your time.
Cool. Thank you so much. And aloha.
Aloha. Yes, aloha. Don't forget the inner self, the stranger within.
Beautiful.